General Michael Hayden, thanks for joining me on UpFront. In your new book, Playing to the Edge, you say the Senate Intelligence Committee report on the CIA's detention and interrogation program, what many call the Senate torture report. You say it's not dispassionate, it's partisan, it's a calumny, a quote, unrelenting prosecutorial screed. I wonder, is your rather harsh assessment of it anything to do with the fact that that report, I think it's the longest report a Senate committee has ever produced, 6,700 pages, 35,000 footnotes. It contains an entire annex at the end outlining more than 30 different inaccurate statements that they say you made to the committee about CIA interrogations, from the number of detainees to the backgrounds of the interrogators. They basically suggest that you lied to them. Repeatedly.
Allegedly inaccurate statements. And what this was, Mehdi, it was my going up to the committee for the first time, going what I would call full Monty to all the members of the Intelligence Committee. So I took on the burden of going up there and presenting the program. Now, I freely admit in the book, I'm doing history. I'm doing this, actually, the Senate meeting you talked about is in 2007. So I'm actually reporting on things that happened at the agency 5 years earlier, and actually 3.5 years before I became director.
So you're saying I got some things wrong?
I freely admit that I got some things wrong, but I also brought...
But they suggest you were trying to mislead them.
No, why would I mislead them? I'm the one arguing that we've got to tell these guys.
But this Senate report was damning. It said the CIA, not just you, but the CIA misled Congress over many years.
Actually, it says a lot of
brutal
things.
Yes, it does. It talks about brutal interrogations. Senator John McCain, former Republican presidential candidate, Republican hawkish senator, former prisoner of war, knows more about torture than probably you or me. He said on the floor of the Senate when the report was published that it was a thorough and thoughtful study of practices that not only failed their purposes to secure actionable intelligence, but actually damaged our security interests as well as our reputation as a force for good in the world. Was John McCain being partisan too? He's a Republican.
Well, John McCain was speaking from his heart. But when I say it's partisan, I mean it's truly partisan, because the report you're referring to was pushed out the door shortly before Congress changed hands. And it was pushed out the door with a companion report from the Republicans on the Senate Intelligence Committee that challenges just about all of the conclusions you find in the Democrat report. That's the definition of partisan.
Well, it wasn't a Democrat report. It was the majority Senate committee report. The fact that some Republicans...
And it was shoved out the door because that was their last days as being the majority. So
they would say they were trying to publish it for a long time and were being blocked by the White House. Let's just deal with the content of the report, to be short. You've said on interrogation that there are certain things that are clearly permissible, and then there are a bunch of things in the middle, there are grey areas. Was it clearly permissible, in your view, for CIA interrogators to use a cordless drill and play Russian roulette with a gun to intimidate and threaten a detainee at a CIA black site? Was that clearly permissible?
Absolutely not. It was not permissible.
Was that torture?
Well, it was illegal.
Was it torture is my question.
Look, torture is a narrowly defined legal term. I'm not a lawyer. I won't get into it. It was wrong. It was operationally wrong. It was ethically wrong.
Was it a crime?
And it was, yes, I think it was.
So the person who used the Russian roulette and the drill should have been prosecuted, because they haven't been.
Well, that was because we turned the information over to the Department of Justice. Our hands were free and turned over to career prosecutors. And
you are now a private citizen who's written a book about it, entire chapters about it.
Yes.
Should the person have used a cordless drill, should he have been prosecuted?
He should have been punished. Look, there are a range of views as to what level the punishment should be.
What's your view?
We gave it to Justice. Before CIA, before I got there. We gave the information to Justice. They took a while to study it. Career prosecutors decided not to prosecute, returned the information to CIA, and CIA then took administrative action. Again, Mehdi, this is all before I arrived.
Was it clearly permissible for an interrogator to threaten to sexually abuse the mother of a detainee at a CIA black site? Should that person have been punished?
Well, yes, of course.
Was he punished?
Before my time, I am certain that CIA took administrative action against all of those.
Like a fine.
Well,
take a couple of days off from the office for threatening to
how about ending your life's work? How about
going to prison?
How about denying you your livelihood?
How about going to prison?
Well, it depends. I mean, the American justice system has a system by which we arrive at those decisions, and in this case, career prosecutors decided not to prosecute.
How about what's been called rectal feeding, the act of forcing pureed hummus and pine nuts through the rectum of one particular detainee who later tried to kill himself? Is that clearly permissible in your view?
Well, to be perfectly candid, when I read that in the report, I learned about it for the first time. It was not an authorized technique. I've since gone back to the agency and asked a view. They said actually that it was medically indicated because this particular individual had gone violent in terms of the agency.
No doctors agree with that view, General Hayden, you know that.
Actually, Mehdi, that's not true.
Really? Well, Professor Thomas Burke, professor of emergency medicine at Harvard, says it's not a normal practice. It's never used by doctors to feed. Professor Stephen Miles of the University of Minnesota, professor of internal medicine, says it's a variation on a medieval form of torture. You can't feed somebody this way.
You found some doctors to give you a view.
Okay, some doctors. Wesley Boyd, Harvard med school professor. Rectal feeding is full on 100% torture, period.
Okay, so now...
Three of America's top professors of medicine.
Actually, it seems as if you've almost helped author the Senate report, because you drill down on a few things which and I've agreed with several of the things you've already identified. But we're talking about 100 and 130 detainees, a third of which had enhanced interrogation techniques used against them, a much smaller number than that, any of these harsh techniques, including waterboarding, which was used only against 3. And so
But you're okay with the rectal feeding, even though doctors say that's not the way you can feed anyone?
Look, I don't have the background, the medical or legal background, to make a judgment on that.
What about waterboarding?
It was not an authorized interrogation
What about
technique.
waterboarding? Khalid Sheikh Mohammed waterboarded 183 times.
I'm sorry,
Abu Zubaydah.
stop. What do you mean 183 times?
Okay, I'll tell you what the CIA's internal records say. They say Mohammed's waterboarding was a, quote, series of near drownings. Abu Zubaydah was completely unresponsive, with bubbles rising through his open, full mouth. The President of the United States says that's torture. Do you think that's torture?
The current President of the United
Yes.
States says that's torture.
Yes.
Right. The Attorney General at the time, and actually a total of 3 Attorneys General, said it wasn't torture.
Do you think it's torture?
Well, I have not been forced to make that decision. What I have done is reflect the legal opinion that was extant at the time these decisions were made.
Yes. And do you think it's torture?
No,
You have no view?
Mehdi, you're the nth person to ask me that.
That doesn't change the reality that you're avoiding a very simple answer.
And I'm not giving an answer.
So if President Assad waterboards Syrian rebels, you will not call that torture?
Oh, that's completely different.
Why? So if America does it, it's fine, but if Syria does it, it's bad.
Let me answer the question, all right? If President Assad did it according to the rules that CIA used, if President Assad did it with medical personnel...
Series of near drownings, completely unresponsive, bubbles rising through his open, full mouth.
In the time limits that we were limited. By the way, the 183 refers to this, refers to the number of pores.
Okay.
Very often, people take 183 as 183
Fair
sessions and so on.
Good point. Series of near drownings, bubbles rising through open, full mouth. That is not torture in your view?
Well, again, the legal opinion extant at the time for a nation that felt itself under very serious threat against a total of 3 individuals whom we believe then and now had life-saving information. That's what happened.
Was it torture, though?
No, I'm not saying it's torture. You're not going to get me to say it's torture.
I just want to ask one quick question about Janat Gul. You must know this detainee, who was held for 47 hours without sleep in a diaper until he begged to be killed. His CIA interrogators told their superiors he didn't have any information. They were told to continue with their quote-unquote enhanced interrogations. Was that clearly permissible? He was then released without charge, by the way.
Well, first of all, with or without charge has no meaning to somebody like me in the intelligence world, all right? What we do in the intelligence world is gain information. This is not a court of law process.
47 hours in a diaper. He tried to kill himself later. He begged to be killed.
Yeah. So I don't...
Is that torture?
Well, apparently, according to the Attorney General at the time, no, it was not.
But according to you?
No, I mean, look, we all
It's nothing torture if the Attorney General says it's not torture. If you pull someone's fingernails out and the Attorney General says it's fine, you think it's fine?
No, actually,
Where
I don't think the Attorney General...
Where do you draw the line? Only whatever the Attorney General says, or do you have a personal line as to what is torture?
Of course I have a personal line.
What is it?
And I will not cross my personal line.
What is it?
But
Tell the viewers
when you take on a responsibility for defending 320 million Americans, you have to combine your personal moral framework with the broader responsibilities. And the point of the book, the point of the book is that this is a sea of gray. You're pointing out what you think are pure white moral high grounds and pure dark moral swamps.
I'm asking you to clear the gray for us. What is your line? What do you say is torture? Where do you draw the line at torture without the help of an Attorney General? Where do you personally draw the line at torture?
Well, there are some things, as I said in the book, there are some things that no one argues about. There are some things that everyone agrees we should never do. Sodomy, pulling out fingernails and so on. And then you've got this gray area in the middle. And let me just walk you through the American reasoning on this, all right? But beyond the headlines, all right? The American concept here in the middle, Mehdi, has to do with what we call shock the conscience, all right? In the totality of circumstances in which you find yourself at that moment, would your behavior shock the conscience of a normal, moral human being? And it depends on a lot of things, not just the narrow definition of the act, why you're doing it, and what world of threat you are living in at the time you were doing it.
Okay, let's talk about drones. In your book, you say drone strikes, quote, offer a proportional and discriminating response to the terrorist threat. Yet as CIA director between 2006 and 2009, according to one estimate, you authorized an estimated 48 drone strikes, which killed 532 people, 144 of whom were civilians. So more than 1 in 4 of those killed in drone strikes that you ordered were civilians. Is that proportional? Is that discriminating enough for you?
None of those numbers comport with any of my life experience. And I don't think they comport, or similar numbers comport, with the life experience of Dave Petraeus or Leon Panetta. I have seen the numbers. Those are inconsistent with reality and
what
history
were the real numbers,
as I know it to be.
We're
not going to talk about that. I
Hold
will tell you this.
You've been accused of killing 144 civilians via drone strikes. You say that number is false. The simple response is, then what is the real number?
Well, the fact of the matter is my government has not yet decided to release the real number. I would happily tell you the real number, but I am not authorized to go beyond where my government has decided to go. Now, my government has also said very recently, and this is a decision I strongly support, that they want to go far more public with the details of the targeted killing program. I fully support that, because otherwise I get to sit in interviews like this, Mehdi, and answer these kinds of accusations without being able to provide data to push back.
The former head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, General Michael Flynn, sitting in that chair last year, told me that drones are a failed strategy. They do more damage than they do good, and there should absolutely be a different approach. He's not alone. General Stanley McChrystal, former head of JSOC, says drones cause tremendous resentment. Robert Grenier, former head of the CIA's Counterterrorism Center, has said we are creating more enemies than we are removing from the battlefield. How do you respond to these colleagues of yours?
I respond with a book. And I talk about this at great length in the book, Mehdi. I talk about the necessity of the primary effect of the targeted killing, which is this is someone who is already able and willing to come do us harm. But Mehdi, we're not fools. I said these are difficult choices. We always knew there were second, third, and fourth order effects, even for a successful targeted killing. We filled in some of the B-roll for the jihadi recruitment video. All right.
It's a major recruitment tool, as Robert Grenier says. We're creating more enemies than we're removing from the battlefield. He was the Islamabad station chief for the CIA, former head of the CIA Counterterrorism Center.
Let me finish the narrative. Let me finish the narrative. All right. And besides that, we did alienate some of our allies. And besides that, there was collateral damage. I am not saying that the number of innocents killed in this program was zero. So you had these second, third, and fourth order effects. But at the time we made these decisions, right then, it was compelling to get the first order effect. They're coming to kill us. Now, we've talked about this.
We don't know who the they is. You signed off on signature strikes, which is killing people who you don't even know who they are.
I don't know their name, rank, and serial number. I know what they do, and I know what they're up to. And in fact,
they're all military-age males in a zone that's decided to be.
I have never used that definition or justification for what are called the.
You're happy to kill people whose names you do not know, whose identities you're not aware of.
That happens in every war. It's called combat.
Yeah, but your argument about drones is it's precise.
Oh, it is precise.
It can't be precise if you're killing someone you don't know.
What do you mean you can't? You see an activity, you know what the activity is. You have, by the way, I mentioned in the book that actually very frequently there was more intelligence available for a signature strike than on a targeted strike against an individual, because for a signature strike you had to have a deep historic pattern of life. You had to have great confidence in the target.
When you write pieces with headlines like drones work, and when you come on shows like this and defend drone strikes, isn't it wrong for you to suggest to the reader or to the viewer that you're approaching this issue merely as a impartial former intelligence official commenting on the videos you've seen, rather than as someone who nowadays sits on the board of 3 companies that make money off of drones? You do, don't you? You work in business now.
Of course,
Shouldn't you reveal that conflict of interest?
Look, I don't make any money from any companies involved in the kinds of drones that are used for targeted killings. I do, however, make use of my experience, and I feel justified that I can talk about my life experience.
Which is fair enough, but when you're talking about drones and you're sitting on the board of 3 companies that are invested in drone technology, surely that's a relevant issue.
I see no connection between what it is I do privately for business and what I believe to be an accurate historical record. By the way, 3 is too big a number. I don't think I have that many companies.
Okay, we'll have to agree to disagree on that. For you, as for many other US intelligence and security officials, everything changed on 9/11. What was unacceptable before 2001 became maybe acceptable after 2001.
Maybe required.
Do you think the United States will ever get back to a pre-9/11 balance between security and liberty, or is this now a permanent state of emergency?
That's a wonderful question. All right, it really is. And it's pretty easy, and I agree with you totally. As a citizen and as a professional, it is easy to ratchet this up. Now imagine the political courage, Mehdi, that's required of an administration that begins to ratchet it down. Because if anything dark happens after you've begun to ratchet it down, the political consequences are massive. I recognize the issue. In 2006, we talked about the interrogation program. I ratcheted it back. I emptied the black sites. I went from 13 techniques to 6. Why? Because the other guys were wrong? Absolutely not. They had their circumstances. I had mine. I had a different legal structure. I had a different perception of the threat. And frankly, I had a hell of a lot more intelligence. Therefore, the totality of circumstances I found myself in caused me to ratchet back what we were doing.
General Michael Hayden, thanks for joining me on UpFront.
Thanks, man.